warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today, our show bringing you all the latest news and events happening all around the Black continent. My name is Angie Meher, and as usual, we begin our episode by taking a look at some of the news making the headlines, and we start with a look at news from home, where Cairo said it plans to put forward 7 African-focused initiatives to address the climate change at the 27th session of the UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP27, which is set to take place in the Egyptian Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh this year in November. Hopes are pinned on the COP27 to turn climate-related pledges into action to help facilitate the transition to green energy in order to reduce harmful greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change as per the Paris Agreement. We have more details in this report.
Cairo said it is to present 7 Africa-focused initiatives to counter climate change at the next UN Climate Conference COP27. The initiatives were shared by Egyptian Environment Ministry at the 18th session of the African Ministers of Environment Conference, AMCEN, held in Senegalese capital Dakar last week. Yasmin Fouad, who is the ministerial coordinator and envoy for COP27, said the Egyptian initiatives are expected to be discussed by the African ministers in coming weeks, according to a statement issued by the Environment Ministry. The first initiative focuses on achieving fair energy transition for Africa, while the second, dubbed Decent Life for Africa, is aimed at improving the lives of African rural communities to strengthen their adaptive capacity. The third initiative is drawn from the Egyptian Decent Life Initiative, comprising a series of countryside-focused national infrastructure projects. Cairo will present Women and Adaptation Initiative, meant to enhance African women's capabilities towards a more resilient environment and provide more green job opportunities. An initiative focusing on agriculture and food will be proposed in Sharm el-Sheikh to assess African agricultural practices and food systems. A water-focused initiative dubbed AWARE is also among the Egyptian proposals to develop an early warning system and protect water from the impact of climate change. The 6th initiative focuses on biodiversity in order to protect marine life and the ecosystem from the consequences of climate change. The 7th initiative, named Africa Waste 50, aims at increasing Africa's recycling rate to 50% by 2050.
Welcome back, and now we're delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest, Dr. Saeed Nasr, the climate change expert. It's a very good afternoon to you, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Could you please increase a little bit the voice, because I heard it difficult.
Yes, can you hear me now, Doctor? Is this a better volume for you?
I need a little bit of increasing the volume.
All right, sure, Doctor. We'll see the line. If you can please just bear with us. And of course, I'd like to start by discussing this conference with you, Doctor, the Conference of Environment Ministers in Senegal that was held. How do you see the importance of joining efforts to combat climate change in Africa, especially when African nations can present a united front at the COP27, which will be hosted later on this year in the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh?
I think the participation in this conference of AMCEN that have been held in Senegal is very important, because it's really for Egypt to cooperate with the African countries.
Yes.
Because Egypt is a leading country in Africa, and Egypt led the negotiations even in the COP in the 2015 in Paris. Since that time, even Egypt taking the lead to cooperate with the African countries in order to benefit from the efforts of finance and technology transfer from the developed countries. Because this type of conference fosters coordination between the African countries, and they can have as a whole a roadmap how to benefit and how to cooperate in the COP27 in order to mainstream the finance and technology transfer to the African countries, which are the most affected countries all over the world.
Indeed.
From climate change.
Which leads me to my next question, Doctor. How is it that Africa has the lowest emissions, which is reported at about 4%, yet it is the most affected region by climate change, despite its slight contribution to the phenomenon?
Because the phenomenon of climate change is a global phenomenon.
Yes.
It means that the climate change is coming and because of the the huge intensities of carbon emissions from the different activities in developed countries, in the industrialized countries. And these all emissions cause the global warming reaching to the climate change, affecting the African countries. At the same time, the African countries have a very, very little development activities like the industries, like the energy generation and use, also even the different activities like in the land use. And in that time, they will be affected globally by the impact of climate change, or the reason of which is the developed countries. And at the same time, their contribution to the emissions to the global warming is very, very minor, so for only 4%, because they have no real activities of development, like the industry and energy generation and use.
Let's talk a bit about, the COP27 that is coming up, and how important is it for developed nations to really be committed and fulfill pledges to support badly African nations, since they are the main contributors to this climate change. How important is it for them to fulfill the pledges that they have made before, whether it's through decreasing emissions or through financial assistance or aid?
Can you repeat again the question, please?
Yes, I was asking you, Doctor, the importance of developed nations or first world countries to commit to the pledges that they've made to assist African nations, whether financially or to cut down on their own emissions.
The developed countries have commitment to reduce the emissions from their activities in the developed countries. But in fact, they cannot make this reduction 100%. They only make a reduction, but according to their plans for development. So it's extremely important in these developed countries to commit to their commitments to reduce the emissions in their countries through reducing the different sources of emissions, like using the coal and the fossil fuel and the other activities that have extensive emissions to the global, causing the global warming. So it's important, it's very important that the developed countries or Annex I countries to commit to their commitments to decrease or to reduce their emissions to the prescribed quantities, percentage, in order to comply with the goals of the convention, of the climate change convention.
Indeed. Doctor, also, how do you see it is important to elaborate, on the mechanisms of enhancing adaptive capacities of rural communities as well as urban communities? How important is it to move towards these adaptive capacities in order to deal with climate change?
I think either called a mechanism or initiative, it's extremely important that there should be an adaptive capacity to increase the adaptive capacity of the developing countries. Because when we speak about adaptation, the adaptation starts with understanding what is the risk of the climate change on the livelihood of the people, of the farmers, of the workers, everything. And then they need to increase their adaptive capacity, because in the developing countries, they have no enough capacity, they have no enough finance, and they have no enough technologies to adapt to climate change. Adaptation to climate change needs a lot of effort, starting with understanding the climate change impact, and also increasing their adaptive capacity, how they can be adaptable to the for example, disaster coming from the climate change, of course, with the climate change, and how this community could be adaptive and to recover their status in a very short time.
Doctor, do you think now that, developed countries have really suffered from climate change and the consequences of climate change? We've seen so many weather-related turbulences all around the world, whether it's droughts or flooding, all affecting issues related as well to food security, which is very important to the whole world. Do you see now that they have actually felt the effects of climate change, that they will be more willing to fulfill pledges of decreasing their own emissions and not exceeding certain carbon levels, etc., as previously they had promised to do?
I think the developed countries, when they are committed according to the convention to a certain amount of reduction of their emissions, and also committed to assist and for the financing and technological transfer in order to increase the adaptive capacity and the adaptation of developing countries towards climate change. The problem is that the real assistance and the real services are not as committed, and at the same time, due to the current circumstances worldwide, like the Russian-Ukrainian war and the crisis of the COVID-19 and the economic crisis, all these are affecting the developed countries regarding the energy, especially. And some of these countries in Europe decided to return back to use the coal, which is very polluting to the environment and the climate change. And because their economy cannot withstand the decrease of or the short of the natural gas and the energy, and this, of course, will affect their commitments towards. I think it will be affected their commitments towards increasing their share in combating the climate change through mobilizing the finance and technology transfer to the developing countries.
Absolutely.
And this is really a major problem that hopefully to be solved in COP27 and not to be a problem for the developed countries to commit to make their commitments easy.
Indeed. Doctor, now many initiatives have also been embarked upon to deal with issues related to climate change, one of which is one dubbed Waste 50, which has been presented by Cairo, and it is aiming at increasing Africa's recycling rate to 50% by 2050. How do you see such initiatives, especially with introducing such concepts to African countries in order to allow more progress when it comes to issues related to climate change and environmental saving factors?
Yeah, I think from an environmental point of view, I think this initiative presented by Cairo to increase the recycling of the waste recycling up to 50% by 2050, I think it's very important, and I hope that this initiative also could be implemented in Cairo and in Greater Cairo to be an example to the developing countries to be replicated in other countries, because it's important. We know that the waste, the recycling of the waste is very important, because the waste sector is one of the sectors emitting emissions and causing the climate change. One of the sources of the carbon emissions to climate change.
Yes.
So, and also it's impacting the health of the people, and that's why it's very important to present such initiative and to commit it even in Cairo, and to be a pilot and pioneer to the other cities and also to the other African countries.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you very, very much. Dr. Sayed Nasser, climate change consultant. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this afternoon and for your insight. And to continue with more news, moving to Niger, where several hundred people demonstrated peacefully on the streets of the Nigerian capital to protest against the French anti-jihadist forces Barkhane, whilst praising Russia. More details in this story.
In Niger, with cries of Barkhane out, down with France, long live Putin and Russia, the demonstrators went through some streets of the capital before holding a meeting in front of the headquarters of the National Assembly. Some demonstrators carried Russian flags and held up signs hostile to France and Barkhane. The demonstration was authorized by the municipal authorities of Niamey. Some 3,000 French troops are still deployed in the Sahel, including Niger, one of Paris's main allies, after their total withdrawal from Mali. The Barkhane force had been ousted by Mali's government since 2020. In April, Niger's deputies had largely voted in favor of a text authorizing the deployment of foreign forces on the territory, including French. Last month, the Malian government accused France of supporting rebel groups. In recent months, several anti-French demonstrations have taken place in the Sahel, notably at the end of November 2021, when a Barkhane military convoy was blocked and stoned in Burkina Faso and then in Niger.
And moving to more news, this time to South Africa, where 2 deaths were reported in South Africa after a COVID-19 vaccination. South Africa, officially Africa's hardest hit country with the pandemic, has more than 4 million cases of the coronavirus and over 102,000 deaths. More details in this story.
South Africa's drug regulator has reported 2 fatal cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS, a rare neurological disorder in people who received the anti-COVID vaccine from the U.S. laboratory Johnson & Johnson J&J. The health authority reported the first death on August 4. J&J stressed in a written response Tuesday that very rare cases of the neurological disorder have been reported after vaccination with Janssen's COVID-19 vaccine, most occurring within the first 42 days after vaccination. They did not give more details on the deceased patients, invoking medical confidentiality. However, the health authority noted in its statement that the effects reported in the vaccinated person corresponded to the definition of a GBS case and no other probable cause of GBS were identified. The syndrome is a peripheral nerve disorder characterized by progressive weakness and paralysis, most often beginning in the legs and sometimes progressing to the respiratory muscles and then to the nerves of the head and neck. South Africa, officially the African country most affected by the pandemic, has recorded more than 4 million cases of coronavirus and 102,129 deaths.
Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of today's edition of Africa Today. We do hope you have enjoyed it. Join us again tomorrow just after 2 p.m. for a new episode with a new crew. Till then, you are in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Thank you for watching.